But no, the thing is, it's weird. and look,
I'm not saying my compatriots are in the dark ages, but, well, come on, do the math, you know what I'm saying?
Does anyone even watch late-night TV anymore? Sure. We see the clips online, a Jimmy Kimmel monologue here.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Please, there's other ones. No.
A closer look with Seth Meyers segment there, or maybe a TikTok from Jimmy Fallon. But how many people actually sit down, turn on their TVs, flip to a network channel, and watch an entire late-night episode from start to finish? The reality is, for most people, the answer is no. Over the last decade, ratings for every single late-night show have been in free fall. This brings us to the bigger picture. The death and future of late night. How chasing trends ruined comedy. During the pandemic in 2020, late-night shows had to adapt quickly when quarantine measures forced them to shoot from home. This abrupt shift led to some creative and, at times, awkward reinventions of the late-night format. Without the polished sets and live studio audiences, many hosts leaned into a more casual, intimate vibe, some successfully, others less so. But even after returning to their studios, late-night TV hasn't quite regained its former glory. One particularly cringeworthy moment for the genre came when Jimmy Fallon and Paris Hilton tried to revive interest by promoting Bored Ape NFTs on The Tonight Show. Fallon enthusiastically explained his choice. "I was going through a lot of them, and I was like, I want something that kind of reminds me of me. But this one, it does." The moment, which might have been intended as relatable or trendy, felt out of touch and solidified a growing sentiment. Late-night TV had become disconnected from its audience. James Cordon. Now, years later, the late-night landscape feels like it's in limbo. What was once an iconic part of American entertainment now feels more like a collection of viral internet clips than must-watch television. This shift is encapsulated perfectly by James Cordon's tenure and eventual departure from The Late Late Show. Cordon announced in April 2022 that he would be stepping away from his hosting duties when his contract ended in April 2023. His departure didn't cause the uproar or speculation it might have sparked a decade earlier. Instead, audiences seemed to shrug it off. If this were 10 years ago, news of Cordon leaving a coveted network slot would have prompted debates about his reasons and intense speculation over his replacement. But when Cordon announced his exit, the reaction was lukewarm at best. This apathy stems partly from Cordon's own controversies, which tarnished his reputation, and partly from the declining appeal of late-night shows as a whole. Cordon, who had risen to fame in the U.S. seemingly out of nowhere, was tasked with replacing Craig Ferguson, a host beloved for his quirky and unconventional style. Taking over The Late Late Show in 2015, Cordon joined a new wave of hosts ushered in by a massive shakeup in late-night TV. Jay Leno passed The Tonight Show baton to Jimmy Fallon. After some infamous drama with Conan O'Brien, David Letterman retired and handed over The Late Show to Stephen Colbert, and Seth Meyers moved from SNL to host Late Night. Although Cordon initially found success with segments like Carpool Karaoke, his public image took a hit over the years. One infamous incident involved being banned from the New York restaurant Balthazar after reportedly mistreating staff. The restaurant's owner described him as a hugely gifted comedian but a tiny cretin of a man. While Cordon argued that the situation stemmed from advocating for his wife's allergy needs, many sided with the restaurant staff. Moments like Cordon's inability to name two of his cameramen during a segment of Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts only added fuel to the fire. By 2017, James Cordon's Late Late Show had been on air for over 2 years. During that time, the host had become a polarizing figure, often blending charm with moments that left audiences questioning his likability. One of those moments came during a segment of Spill Your Guts or Fill Your Guts, when guest Jimmy Kimmel asked Cordon to name two of his own cameramen. Caught off guard, Cordon awkwardly played it off with a joke, claiming it was a different crew that night while failing to answer the question. For a host to not even know the names of his crew, people he worked with nightly, may have seemed trivial to some, but to many, it spoke volumes about his character and leadership. Late-night hosts like Kimmel, Colbert, Conan, Seth Meyers, Trevor Noah, and even Jimmy Fallon have cultivated reputations for knowing and respecting their teams. Kimmel, in particular, is known for fostering a family-like atmosphere among his crew, some of whom are literally family members. It's hard to imagine any of them faltering in the same situation. More damning was the fact that the question itself had likely come from Cordon's own staff, hinting at tensions behind the scenes. While this incident might not carry the same weight as his notorious behavior at New York's Balthazar restaurant, where he was temporarily banned for being abusive to staff, it highlighted an ongoing pattern of behavior. Take, for example, the now infamous moment with Alice Cooper during an interview. When the legendary rocker revealed a phobia of balloons being rubbed together because of the sound, Cordon immediately mimicked the noise, seemingly for a laugh. While the intent might have been humor, the act came across as dismissive and cruel, especially given how visibly uncomfortable Cooper became. And then there are the crosswalk musicals, one of Cordon's signature segments. On paper, the concept is brilliant. Elaborate Broadway-style performances staged in busy Los Angeles intersections during red lights, forcing performers and crew to scramble off the road as traffic resumes. These skits often feature high-profile stars, from Harry Styles and BTS to Josh Gad, and are intended to bring whimsy to the grind of LA traffic. But for local residents, the bit represents more of an inconvenience than entertainment. The crosswalk is in a perpetually busy area, and production staff reportedly manipulate the traffic light timing to accommodate the performance, causing further congestion. Drivers caught in the chaos often look visibly irritated in the show's clips, some shouting at Cordon and his team to get out of the way. One memorable scene even showed a performer possibly damaging a car while trying to climb onto it during a musical number. If you are a local Angelino, you might reflect on the juxtaposition of the spectacle and reality. While standing at the now iconic Cordon crosswalk, plastered with the host's image on the nearby CBS building. But as they crossed the street themselves, the veneer of glamour began to fade. The theatrics, the traffic disruptions, the aura of fame, all served as a metaphor for Cordon's divisive legacy. In this way, Cordon's career is a paradox. His talent and charm have propelled him to international stardom, yet his penchant for alienating those around him, whether through careless jokes, dismissive behavior, or public controversies, has left a sour taste for many. Jimmy Fallon. Jimmy Fallon's tenure on The Tonight Show marked a seismic shift in late-night television. Taking over in 2014, Fallon quickly propelled the show to the top of the ratings. His charm and playful energy seemed perfectly suited for a new generation of viewers who favored games, celebrity antics, and viral stunts over traditional monologues and interviews. Early on, Fallon's approach appeared revolutionary, revitalizing a format that had begun to feel stale. But over time, this very formula contributed to challenges that hindered his long-term success in the late-night arena. When Fallon assumed hosting duties, The Tonight Show became the late-night destination. His penchant for fun, family-friendly antics like face-cat ball or lip-sync battles tapped into a broad audience, particularly younger viewers. The show excelled at creating moments designed for YouTube virality, expanding its reach far beyond traditional TV viewership. Fallon wasn't just a host, he was the face of late night's future, or so it seemed. This period saw Fallon dominate both the ratings and the cultural conversation. While Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, and others carved out niche audiences, Fallon became the go-to choice for lighthearted, escapist entertainment. He masterfully cultivated an environment where celebrities felt at ease, showcasing their personalities in ways that resonated with fans. His decision to make The Roots his house band also added credibility and musical brilliance, earning praise from fans and critics alike. As the late-night landscape evolved, cracks began to form in Fallon's approach. The rise of political polarization, accelerated by the 2016 election, ushered in a new era of late-night television. Viewers increasingly gravitated toward hosts like Stephen Colbert, whose sharp political satire became a defining feature of his show. Fallon's deliberate avoidance of politics, once a selling point, now felt out of step with the moment. His admission in a 2018 interview that he regretted his reluctance to engage with political topics highlighted the growing disconnect. Adding to this shift was a broader cultural reckoning with celebrity idolization. Platforms like Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok made celebrities more accessible than ever, diminishing the exclusivity once offered by late-night appearances. Fallon's heavy reliance on celebrity-driven content began to feel redundant in an era where fans could interact directly with stars on social media or watch unfiltered interviews on podcasts and streaming platforms. The Imagine moment, a turning point for celebrity culture. One defining moment underscored this changing relationship with celebrity culture, the infamous Imagine video. Released early in the COVID-19 pandemic, the well-meaning but tone-deaf montage of stars singing John Lennon's classic anthem drew widespread criticism. It encapsulated a growing disdain for celebrities perceived as out of touch with ordinary struggles. While Fallon wasn't involved, the backlash to the video exemplified a cultural shift that impacted all celebrity-driven media, including his show. Stepping into the role of The Tonight Show host carries immense pressure, with comparisons to legendary predecessors like Johnny Carson and Conan O'Brien looming large. Fallon's lighter, more entertainment-focused approach starkly contrasted with their eras. While some viewed this as a downgrade, others embraced his uniqueness, arguing that expecting him to emulate Carson or Conan was an unfair standard. Fallon's skill set was never rooted in traditional stand-up or biting satire. Instead, it lay in his ability to connect with audiences through joy and spontaneity. Despite the criticisms, Fallon's impact on late-night television is undeniable. He reinvented the genre for a digital age, making The Tonight Show a staple of online content and creating memorable moments that brought smiles to millions. In the end, Fallon's tenure is a reflection of both his strengths and the challenges of navigating a rapidly changing cultural landscape. While his lighter, fun-loving approach may have struggled to adapt to a more politically charged era, it's also a reminder of the joy and escapism that late-night television can offer. Jimmy Kimmel. Now, when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel, it's hard to feel strongly one way or the other. For many viewers, myself included, Kimmel occupies a sort of middle ground in late-night television, a reliable if unremarkable figure. Every now and then, one of his monologues or viral segments might catch my attention, but it rarely leaves a lasting impression. During the pandemic's quarantine phase, Kimmel's show, much like James Cordon's, felt lackluster. There wasn't much innovation or energy, and the at-home setup seemed to emphasize how cookie-cutter Jimmy Kimmel Live truly is. The show leans heavily on the traditional late-night formula, offering the kind of humor and structure that feels dependable but uninspired. However, one unique aspect of Kimmel's approach is his use of viral video clips and news footage interwoven with his monologue. This gives his delivery a slightly more reactive and modern edge as he builds jokes around these shared cultural moments. It's a smart tactic for the YouTube era, where these bits perform well as standalone clips. Still, while this keeps the show relevant, it doesn't necessarily elevate it to groundbreaking territory. Looking at the broader picture of late night after the quarantine era, the major hosts, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Kimmel, haven't significantly altered their formats since returning to regular tapings. Fallon has struggled with adapting to a politically charged atmosphere. Colbert, meanwhile, has maintained his edge in political satire, but softened some of his sharper wit from his Colbert Report days. Kimmel, on the other hand, seems content to stay firmly in his lane. His show hasn't leaned heavily into politics like Colbert, nor has it banked on celebrity games and stunts like Fallon. It's a straightforward late-night talk show, and while that may not excite younger viewers, it does ensure consistency for his established audience. Ultimately, Jimmy Kimmel feels like the epitome of safe late-night television. He rarely courts controversy, and his comedy is seldom divisive. For some, this makes him a comforting presence. For others, it renders him forgettable. Unlike Fallon, whose playful antics can polarize, or Colbert, whose sharp wit can feel tailored to a specific audience, Kimmel's neutrality might just be his defining characteristic. Whether that's an asset or a limitation depends entirely on what viewers want from their late-night host. Late-night TV in transition, a reflection on Seth Meyers, Conan O'Brien, and the changing landscape. The world of late-night television has evolved dramatically over the past decade, and shows like Late Night with Seth Meyers exemplify the resilience and adaptability required to survive in a shifting entertainment landscape. As one of the most engaging late-night hosts of the current era, Seth Meyers has earned praise for his sharp wit, seamless rapport with guests, and a collaborative dynamic with his writers and crew that radiates through the screen. From topical humor to endearing behind-the-scenes moments, Meyers has solidified his place in the hearts of many viewers. One particularly notable chapter in Meyers' tenure came during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic. While other shows scrambled to adapt to the constraints of quarantine, Meyers quickly transitioned to filming from home. His A Closer Look segments became a standout, offering audiences a reliable dose of topical comedy amidst the uncertainty of the pandemic. These home-produced episodes, intimate and unpolished, felt more akin to the informal style of YouTube content than the polished sheen of network television, marking a significant shift in how late-night shows connect with their audiences. The rise of digital-first audiences. The pandemic didn't just alter how late-night shows were produced, it also transformed how they were consumed. For younger viewers like myself, the era of tuning in to live network broadcasts gave way to a preference for on-demand content via YouTube or streaming platforms. Personally, while I occasionally indulged in late-night segments on YouTube, I abandoned live TV altogether, save for the occasional live episode of Saturday Night Live. This evolution represents more than just a change in viewing habits. It signals a deeper cultural shift. Late-night TV, once a cornerstone of American entertainment, now competes with an endless array of digital content. Celebrity interviews, for instance, no longer require a couch on a late-night set. Viewers can turn to podcasts like Hot Ones or YouTube series from outlets like GQ and Wired for in-depth conversations. Meanwhile, social media platforms like Twitter often serve as the first venue for breaking topical jokes, diminishing the allure of late-night monologues. The changing role of late night. The decline of live viewership has forced late-night shows to reconsider their formats. As a longtime fan of Conan O'Brien, I admired how he reimagined his brand, pivoting from traditional late night to an immensely successful podcast and a focus on travel remotes, formats that better showcased his unique comedic style. This willingness to evolve contrasts with the rigidity of traditional formats, which increasingly struggle to resonate in today's fragmented media landscape. Seth Meyers has managed to keep late night relevant by leaning into digital platforms and adapting his segments to viral-friendly formats. However, the success of these efforts highlights a broader challenge. Late-night TV no longer holds the cultural dominance it once did. Instead, it exists as one of many entertainment options in a sea of diverse content. From John Oliver's thought-provoking weekly deep dives to the boundary-pushing satire of Ziwe or Hassan Minhaj's Patriot Act, the writer's strike, and the future of late night. A poignant reminder of late-night TV's collaborative nature came during the recent Writers Guild of America, WGA, strike. Hosts like Seth Meyers and John Oliver paused production to stand in solidarity with their writers, emphasizing their integral role in crafting the jokes, monologues, and segments that make these shows possible. Meyers, a WGA member himself, underscored the importance of fair compensation for writers, dispelling the misconception that Hollywood strikes benefit only the wealthy elite. This moment of unity highlighted the shifting economics of the entertainment industry. As audience preferences move away from traditional TV and toward streaming and digital platforms, the financial models that sustained late night for decades have become increasingly unsustainable. Looking back, I'm struck by the stark contrast between my teenage years glued to Conan O'Brien's TBS debut and my current viewing habits, dominated by on-demand content. The late-night format, once a dream of mine, now feels like a relic of a simpler time when TV options were limited and the laughter shared over late-night jokes brought people together. How chasing trends ruined comedy. Late-night comedy once held a special place in American culture, serving as a warm, comforting presence at the end of the day. It was a time when families gathered around their televisions, and hosts like Johnny Carson became household names. While Carson wasn't the originator of the late-night talk show format, following in the footsteps of Jack Paar, he was the first to truly capture America's collective attention in a way that felt both timeless and universal. During Carson's reign as the host of The Tonight Show, his show was more than just entertainment. It was an institution. Everyone tuned in. When Carson signed off for the last time in 1992, his farewell week drew a staggering 19.45 million viewers. To put this in perspective, the next time a late-night host even came close to that level of viewership was over 2 decades later in 2014, when Jimmy Fallon took over The Tonight Show and garnered 11.3 million viewers during his premiere week. However, late-night comedy today is a shadow of its former self. Despite this, there's still a case to be made for the late-night format. As with any medium, the quality of a show hinges on how it's executed. Unfortunately, what dominates the late-night landscape today is often a watered-down, uninspired version of what the format could be. In contrast, long-form conversation podcasts, such as Joe Rogan's massively successful show, which boasts 100 million downloads a month and over 1 billion downloads annually. Rogan's format is, arguably, the most successful episodic media in history, and it highlights a growing appetite for deeper, more authentic content. But the decline of late-night comedy isn't just about changing tastes or the rise of podcasts. There's a deeper issue at play. The corporatization of comedy has fundamentally altered the creative DNA of these shows. Network executives, driven by the need to appeal to advertisers and maintain safe programming, often push for predictable, risk-averse content. Take Jimmy Fallon, for example. His earlier days in late night were characterized by quirky, avant-garde sketches and wacky humor that felt refreshingly different. But as his show gained mainstream success, the focus shifted. Today, Fallon's viral celebrity games are a staple, not because they're groundbreaking, but because they're a safe bet for trending online. The result? Late-night comedy feels homogenized, with each show blending into the next. Yet there's evidence that the late-night format still has untapped potential. Conan O'Brien's web-exclusive series Serious Jibber Jabber is a case in point. Essentially a long-form interview show, it revealed Conan's talent as a conversationalist in a more relaxed, podcast-like setting. It stood in sharp contrast to the quicker, punchier pacing of his main late-night show. This distinction is important. Long-form conversations and traditional late-night banter are 2 different art forms, each with its own strengths and weaknesses. both can succeed if executed thoughtfully. David Letterman and his successor, Conan O'Brien, mastered the art of late night in a way that most of their peers haven't. They understood the quirks of the medium and leaned into them, bringing a mix of irreverence, self-awareness, and genuine humor that made their shows stand out. By contrast, today's hosts often feel like they're going through the motions, leaving their performances feeling hollow and disconnected. One thing that might alienate younger audiences in the internet age is the overly grandiose tone of these shows. They present themselves with an air of importance, flashy suits, silk curtain backdrops, and elaborate sets, but don't always deliver on the laughs. When James Cordon or Jimmy Fallon crack stale jokes aimed at middle-aged audiences while standing in this pompous setting, younger viewers might understandably think, "This is what you want me to laugh at?" It's a far cry from the approach taken by Letterman, who always seemed keenly aware of how ridiculous the late-night setup could be. He turned the medium's extravagance into part of the joke, mocking its pretentiousness rather than indulging in it. For example, while Amazon might find itself grappling with news of its basics products literally catching fire, Letterman might have delivered a perfectly dry one-liner like, "I've heard of Kindle Fire, but this is ridiculous," followed by a shrug and a knowing smirk. That balance of sharp humor and self-deprecation was a hallmark of his style. Similarly, Conan O'Brien carried on this tradition of poking fun at the absurdity of late night, never taking the format, or himself, too seriously. When asked about moving to the 11:30 slot and appealing to a broader audience, Conan made it clear he wouldn't water down his quirky sense of humor, saying, "You just do what you can do and see how it works." He didn't try to mold himself into the establishment. Instead, he brought his unique personality to the table, and audiences loved him for it. The difference is striking when compared to the current crop of hosts. Where Letterman and Conan made a point of mocking the lavishness of their shows, turning the grandeur into part of the comedy, modern hosts often revel in it unironically. Take Stephen Colbert, whose studio is a massive, cathedral-like space adorned with his own face. The setup has all the makings of a great running joke, but instead it's treated as just another backdrop for the show, a missed opportunity to turn the absurdity into comedy gold. Traditionally, late-night shows follow a familiar structure: a monologue, a desk-side comedy bit, guest interviews, and a musical act. Within this format, there's plenty of room for experimentation and personality, which is what made Letterman and Conan so memorable. They didn't just follow the formula, they used it as a playground for creativity and self-expression. The humor wasn't just about the jokes they told, but also about how they handled the medium itself, often exposing its silliness for laughs. In contrast, today's hosts seem to play it safe, sticking to predictable formats and failing to challenge the conventions of the medium. The result is a late-night landscape that feels stale and uninspired, a far cry from the bold, boundary-pushing comedy that Letterman and Conan perfected. There's still potential for late night to thrive, but it'll take a return to that spirit of irreverence and experimentation to make it feel fresh again. Stephen Colbert's evolution as a late-night host is puzzling, especially for those who admired his razor-sharp performance on the Colbert Report. On his Comedy Central show, Colbert was a force of nature, commanding, irreverent, and unapologetically absurd. But as the host of The Late Show, he seems to have lost some of that edge, with the humor often feeling repetitive and less dynamic. Interestingly, Colbert himself hinted at this shift in a 2015 interview with Jerry Seinfeld. Sporting a beard and a more candid demeanor, he admitted that after 9 years of the Colbert Report, he was ready to step away from the spotlight. "Because I've been doing this show for 9 years, and my body has started burning my teeth for fuel," he joked, revealing the toll the show had taken on him. He was planning to retire when the opportunity to succeed David Letterman on The Late Show came knocking, a role he felt he couldn't refuse. Seinfeld's response encapsulated the gravity of the decision. I gotta say, though, following David Letterman, that must be intimidating. Yeah, you must have some balls. And while Colbert accepted the challenge, the implications are significant. Instead of watching a performer eager to ascend to new heights, we're seeing someone who had already decided to step back, only to jump back in. The contrast between Colbert's current self and his Colbert Report persona is stark. On his previous show, he embodied a finely tuned satirical character, a self-obsessed, conservative narcissist who reveled in the absurdity of his own creation. He played with the late-night format brilliantly, turning interviews into comedic duels and basking in the applause with exaggerated bravado. The character's wit and unpredictability made every segment feel fresh and daring. Today's Colbert, however, has leaned heavily into political humor, making it the cornerstone of his entire show. The monologue, desk bits, and interviews often feel like a seamless continuation of a single theme, what some might call a nightly Trump-a-thon. While this approach has been highly successful, propelling him past Jimmy Fallon in the ratings, it's also limited in scope. Much like Fallon's reliance on predictable, celebrity-driven, YouTube-friendly segments, Colbert's success hinges on one polarizing topic: Donald Trump. This strategy has undeniably worked for Colbert in the short term, allowing him to dominate the late-night landscape. But for fans of his Colbert Report days, it's hard not to wonder what might have been if he'd found a way to balance his biting satirical roots with his new platform. Instead of evolving, the show has settled into a routine that, while effective, feels like it's playing it safe rather than pushing boundaries. Late-night TV used to feel like two separate worlds. On one side, you had Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert, reigning over their unique island of sharp, satirical comedy. They operated in their own space, distinct from the traditional late-night format. But now, the lines between these worlds have blurred. Networks and audiences lump together hosts like Jimmy Kimmel, Trevor Noah, Bill Maher, and James Cordon, treating them all as competitors within the same genre. This homogenization doesn't do anyone any favors. Take Jimmy Fallon, for instance. When he says he didn't pay attention to ratings early on and was just having fun, I believe him. His carefree approach was a big part of what propelled him to Tonight Show success. But once Stephen Colbert started closing in, the executives clearly pushed him to focus on the numbers, and it showed. Colbert, for his part, excels in areas where other late-night hosts might struggle. His interviews with politicians and intellectuals bring an elevated discourse to a mainstream audience, and that's a genuine strength. However, when it comes to the comedy in his monologues, his celebrity interviews, or defining a distinct show identity with desk-side bits, he falls short. The transition from his Colbert Report persona to hosting as himself has been jarring. After years of playing an over-the-top satirical character, audiences aren't entirely sure who the real Colbert is, beyond being smart, witty, and political. That lack of clarity affects the show's chemistry and humor. His celebrity interviews, in particular, often miss the mark. Colbert struggles to create comedic or personal chemistry with his guests. Part of the issue stems from his past. As his Colbert Report character, he thrived by mocking the very concept of celebrity. Now, he's expected to play it straight and entertain America. But instead of engaging with guests in a natural way, he sometimes comes off as self-aggrandizing, which may get a laugh in the studio but often feels awkward to viewers at home. For example, he might say something like, "Do you know who the #1 knight is right now?" You. That's right. It's not really a conversation, it's more of a performance of a conversation. The host's job is to set the guest up for success, letting them shine while reacting in a way that enhances the moment. Compare this to Conan O'Brien. When Bill Burr comes on with his wild takes, Conan expertly plays along, pushing back just enough to spotlight what's funny without shutting Burr down. Bill: "You know how I'd do it? I'd randomly sink cruise ships." Conan: "Wait, what?" Let's hear him out. Bill: "Why?" because you'd get like 2,500 to 3,000 people off whack, and it's a good mix of people to get rid of. That back and forth feels organic, highlighting Burr's outrageous humor while letting Conan react in a way that pulls viewers into the joke. Fallon, on the other hand, has a completely different style. His enthusiasm doesn't feel fake. It's just who he is, the guy who loves everyone and wants them to know it. But there's a limit to how far that can take a conversation. Constantly showering guests with praise, "You're amazing, you crushed it, you're great," feels less like a genuine interaction and more like an infomercial. It leaves no room for actual chemistry or comedy. Audiences can sense when something feels artificial. Fallon's overuse of laughter and lack of meaningful questions have dulled his charm over time. While studio audiences feed off the energy of being in the room with celebrities, viewers at home need more than applause to keep them engaged. Authenticity matters, and when a host doesn't strike that balance, it becomes painfully obvious. In the end, the best late-night hosts know how to react to their guests and play off their energy in ways that feel natural. Whether it's Conan's quick wit or Colbert's intellectual edge, what keeps audiences engaged isn't the format or the star power, it's the moments of genuine connection and creativity that make us feel like we're in on the joke. While late night as an institution may never regain its former glory, its legacy endures in the laughter it brought to living rooms across the country. Whether it fades into obscurity or evolves into something entirely new, the memories and moments it created, thanks to the brilliant work of writers and hosts, will always hold a special place in the hearts of fans.